Welcome, everyone. We've got some more people filtering in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And also, welcome to the more than 30 people who have joined us online. Hello out there. My name is Fran Fabrizio, and along with Julie Rashid, I am the co-chair, there's Julie, of the Professional Development and Recognition Committee, which is part of the P&A Senate. And one of the things that we do is put on a brown bag series, and this is the first of 4 that we will be having this year. So thank you for coming. Today, we are going to have a talk by Whitney Moore, and I'm going to do a very brief bio. She asked me to not share all the details, so I'll just give you the highlights of a very impressive bio, and then we'll get started. Her talk is entitled Leveraging Positivity, Getting Beyond Think Positive. And Whitney is a career counselor at the College of Science and Engineering, and she's been there since 2011. And before that, she is the past president of the Minnesota College and University Career Services Association. She has degrees from Gustavus and from Minnesota State Mankato. So she's got a full suite of Minnesota credentials there.
I do.
She says that away from campus, she continues living a life of positivity by, among other things, sharing her thoughts on positivity on Instagram at The Positivist Explorer. So go check that out afterwards. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Whitney Moore for our presentation today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm really excited to have you all here. And I promise I'm not scary, so if you want to move up, you're more than welcome to, but it's probably easier eyesight for the slides where you're all at up there. Happy lunchtime. I hope that you all are refueling your bodies right now with some delicious food. And I really view my role right now to help refuel your minds and your spirits. So hopefully you can go into your weekend feeling really energized. So I have a lot of motivations for doing this talk today, and it's definitely something that is a long time in the making, and I've started talking a lot about over the last probably couple of years. And it kind of stems from some things that I hear all too often about positivity being associated with only certain personality types, positivity being naive, maybe living a charmed life, not having to face a lot of hardships. And I'm a really big believer that none of that is accurate. That no matter what your life circumstances are, or what you've experienced, or even what your predisposition is for thinking negatively, that all can be changed. And so I'll kind of take you on a little bit of a journey at the beginning here to tell you about how I've kind of gotten to where the things I'm going to be presenting about today. With a full recognition that there's probably a variety of folks in the room that may fall at different places on this spectrum of being a really total optimist, being more of that realist, maybe feeling like you're a little bit more of a negativist. And that's great because I want to have this conversation with anybody who wants to. So no matter where you're at, you're welcome. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts too. So I'm definitely going to be the first one to admit that I've been positive my entire life. And even as a kid, I would say things like I had this saying that I would say was, "You're not old till you're 100. When you're 100, you're young again. So you never grow old." Don't know where I got that, but ever since I was a little kid, it's something that I've been saying, as well as a lot of other quirky sayings as well. And I've always just been somebody who's wanted to motivate and inspire people. But I think that's also faced me with a few barriers. And we're going to talk about some of those too. But I think there's definitely some barriers around being somebody that kind of presents themselves or brings to the world kind of that positive lens. And like I was kind of saying earlier, there's been a lot of assumptions about me that I haven't faced hardship or I haven't dealt with challenging situations. And I'm obviously not here to rattle off all the hardships that I've been through or any of that, but rest assured, I've dealt with some real tough stuff in my life. And so I just want you to know that, so you know that whatever you've dealt with, like, I can relate to you. I've been there too, and that I'm definitely not bringing a perspective of somebody who hasn't dealt with that. I think it's important also to acknowledge that I am here in front of you with a lot of privilege too, as a cis white woman, and so I just want to put that out there as well, that I do recognize that that's where I'm coming from, and the more and more I talk about this, the more and more I recognize different ways that I need to make sure that I'm acknowledging that that's definitely part of the perspective that I'm bringing, and hope that that you'll kind of have some understanding of that's part of where I'm coming from, but then I'm also really striving to make sure that I'm able to identify with a variety of people. Because and I would say one of the things that's really caused me to want to learn more about positivity and a lot of the things that I've always believed about it and kind of have some proof behind it is that, like most people, for the first 20 years of my life, I was surrounded largely by people who were similar to me. And it wasn't really until I got into the professional world that I started to be actually had to face some of the barriers that come along with presenting kind of a positive perspective in the world. And I definitely don't mean to talk about that in a negative way, because it gave me some motivation to try and figure out how can we help everybody feel like they can live a positive life. So I don't mean that in a negative, those barriers I don't mean in a negative way. I mean them in a, this just makes me want to learn more, and it challenged me to figure out some different ways of talking about it. So like I said, the older I've gotten and the further I've gotten into my professional career, I started to learn, I think there's a lot of value in this positivity thing, but I know that this like a rainbows and sunshine sort of approach doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for most people, and usually doesn't even work for me, even though I am a positive person. And so I think I definitely was confronted with this challenge that I wanted to overcome, as our office went through a lot of change, but then also as I started to work with students. So as was mentioned earlier, I'm a career counselor in the college, and obviously I'm working with in the STEM fields, working with a lot of students that tend to have a more realistic sort of black and white thinking in their mindset and in their perspective. And I think obviously it's an asset that I maybe am offering something coming from a little bit different perspective. But I really started to learn that I needed to, there were kind of two things that I needed to learn more about or kind of figure out in order to help me effectively work with the student population that I was working with, but also with other professionals. So the first thing I needed to do was figure out, okay, how can I learn more about positivity and different ways of talking about it, different language that other people will relate to, and that kind of this idea of just think positive doesn't work. It's too simplistic. The other thing that I wanted to do then, because I've had this belief that anybody can live this way or can think this way, is I wanted to actually have some science to back it up. And maybe that's because I work with science and engineering students. I was like, there's got to be some science out there about the brain that will prove that anybody can adopt this approach. And so there's a lot of things that I started doing in order to help me understand the kind of the language piece, but then also the science behind it. So I did what I kind of call a haphazard literature review, if you will. And I just started reading articles, listening to podcasts, reading books on a lot of topics that I considered tangential to positivity, because I felt like if I just went to positivity, I wasn't going to get any new language. I was kind of just trying to figure out what are other topics or other things related to positivity that help us live, kind of more of that whole full life. And I think that's kind of what we're looking for when we talk about living a positive life. It's really about living a whole full life. And what other things influence that, or what other researchers outside of positivity are really striving for that same thing? They're just using different words to talk about it. And so these are some of those topics that I started to just like listen to people talk about or read about. So a full list up there, and there's a ton of different people that I heard talk about this, read their writing, and from that, I really started to kind of synthesize a lot of different observations. So this is where I'm going to tell you I'm not an expert on positivity. My degree, my master's degree is in counseling, so I think I have a really strong foundation for addressing topics around mindset. Due to my educational and academic training. But academically speaking, I'm not a positivity expert. So I guess what I really am just trying to say is that what I'm hoping to offer today is just kind of my perspective, my consensus, my conclusion about a lot of things I've learned about positivity in my own life and how I've been able to utilize these strategies with people that I work with and students that I work with to help not only myself but other people around me adopt kind of a different mindset. So like I said, this is kind of my haphazard literature review. One of the big ways that I was able to, I would read all these things and I was like, I need to figure out that language. Like I said, one of the big ways I did it was through an Instagram account. So if you're on Instagram and want to follow along, I post about 5 days a week about positivity or just about life perspectives and things like that in general. So I'd love to have you follow along for a little shameless plug there. But I think a lot of what I share about there, just so you know, isn't even about me. It's about just other things that I think that are cool that are going on, or other people that I know about too. So definitely feel free to follow along there if you'd like to. So let's talk about positivity. This is where some audience participation starts to come into play. So when you think about positivity, good or bad, what are some different phrases, like I said, barrier labels, so even negative things that come to mind? When you hear that positivity, what are some of those things that come to mind? Just shout them out.
Glass half full, half empty.
Glass half full, glass half empty. Yeah. Rose-colored glasses, yep. Did I hear another one? Ignorance is bliss. Mm-hmm. Pollyanna, for sure.
Can't see the bright side of the sun.
Can't see the bright side of the sun.
I was going to say head in the clouds.
Head in the clouds. Naive. Anything else? Strong.
You think you can or can't, you're right.
You think you can't, you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right. So big mindset one. Yeah. Any last couple that come to mind? Now I wasn't keeping a tally, but I would say a majority of those were negative perceptions. Would you agree? A majority of those that were mentioned were negative. And like I said, that's kind of a reality that I've accepted and that I've faced a good chunk of my life. There was somebody that I used to interact with in a professional setting who even told a colleague of mine at one point that she thought I was really naive because of a positive perspective that I had offered in a staff meeting. So I think when I really started to think about this work, I kind of say that I'm trying to make a case for the positivist because I think that there is a place, as I've said many times, a place for this in the world, and that even that person who thought that I was being naive has the ability to change that way of thinking in themselves as well. But I do agree that it's easy for these perceptions to feel accurate and to feel true. Especially those last couple of phrases are ones that I put up there. Focus on, just focus on the positive. Ignore, that kind of, just ignore the negative. Just focus on the positive, or just think positive. Those phrases don't work for me either, because it's really not. There are some times in life where it's that simple, but most of the time, I don't feel like it is. So, I think that's really important to address. But I do think that one of the reasons I'm really attached to this idea of clinging to positivity is because I think the way that I'm going to talk about and define it is what helps us continue to move forward in life. In meaningful ways, in productive ways, in efficient and effective ways. And so to me, that's why a positive perspective is actually about leadership and really does play a role when it comes to leadership. So this is how I like to talk about positivism. I like to talk about, and I use that word to try and separate positivity because of some of the more negative barrier labels that I know, like we just talked about, are kind of attached to it. So I started using positivism, kind of like optimism, but positivism, so that we have a different word. So to me, really at the heart of positivity or positivism is that it's a choice and a skill that can be practiced and cultivated. And I'm going to talk more about how we do that. To me, it's also a response to an interpretation of life's events. So I'm going to talk about this one for me plays into how positivity is different than optimism, which I'll talk about in a minute. Positivism is intentional and action oriented. So it's not an outlook. It's more about being intentional in how we're responding to things. And this is the big one. It accepts the full range of human emotion, human experience. I think one of the key tenets to positivity and to living a positive life is accepting and acknowledging that bad things happen. And that we're going to feel bad things. We're going to be angry. We're going to be upset. We're going to be frustrated. And we can't pretend like we're never going to feel that way. But to me, what's more important is what we do with those feelings. So I'm a big believer in the idea that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond or react to it. And so, I think it's very important to acknowledge that really, I feel like true positive living is going to acknowledge those things, but then cares more about, okay, well, now what do I do as a result of that? And at the end, I hope we'll have some time to dig into some strategies on how to do it. So those are kind of the big tenets, I think, to me. I really like this image that I just have to pop up there. My husband sent this to me a few weeks ago and was like, oh, you should post this on the Positivist Explorer. Because I think, again, it kind of relates to that last piece I was talking about, that there's always going to be good and bad. We're going to have all of those, that full spectrum of life. And so that's why I actually don't talk about negativity being the opposite of positivity. To me, the opposite of positivity is apathy. It's just not caring and a total disregard. Because positivity and negativity, that spectrum is just a part of life. It's part of the human experience. We need all of it to have a full human experience. But I think apathy is the opposite, because it's just the thing that causes us to not care and not want to engage in that human experience. So just again, kind of another way to reframe maybe how you're thinking about positivity. Another thing, like I already kind of mentioned, I wanted to address is the difference between positivity and optimism. So, and again, this is how I define it. This is how I think about it based off of a lot of different things that I've read. This is just kind of the conclusion that I've come to. So I always talk about positivity is what allows me to be an optimist. So being a positivist is what allows me to be an optimist. And I don't think that I could be really, I would rather it be that way, because I don't think solely being an optimist is effective. So I'm able to be a positive or be an optimist because I believe, because I have this positive, I have a positive way of interpreting the world and responding to situations. So by being a positivist, I feel like I will be able to respond to life's events in a way that will be productive, that will be healthy, that will be effective, which gives me hope that I can handle what comes my way, which gives me that optimism I can handle what comes my way. So positivity is more about a reaction and a response, whereas optimism is more about an outlook. And I think if all you have is an optimistic outlook, sometimes that can get you hung up if something bad happens or something unexpected happens and you're not prepared for how to handle it. So the outlook alone, I don't think is effective. I think you need to be able to also be able to be reactionary and handle it when they come. So that's kind of how I think about them differently, and how I want, kind of why I think that positivity needs to come first. So from all these things that I've read then, and from my own experiences working with students, on things that they're struggling with, because let's face it, job searching is a, I don't want to say the most challenging, but it's one of the more challenging things that we may have to do in life, among a lot of other things, obviously. But it's challenging, and so a lot of different elements of struggle come up in my appointments and interactions with students. And then, like I said, just kind of through my own life, but then also through all these things I've read, all these different people that I've heard speaking about, all these different topics tangential to positivity. I've kind of felt like the things we struggle with fall into one of these three categories. So it's either things that we struggle with because we don't have control over them, things that we struggle with because our expectations aren't right or aren't in alignment with maybe where they should be, and then the things that we're telling ourselves. So that's self-talk. So two of them, control and expectations, often have to do with the external world, the things that are happening around us, whereas self-talk is happening internally. So these are the three things that I try to focus on or think a lot about when I'm thinking about my own life and situations that are happening to me, but also as I'm working with other people and helping coach them through whatever situation it is that they are facing. So sense of control, to kind of focus on that just a little bit. I like I was kind of saying earlier, I'm a big believer in that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. So I know whenever I'm faced with a situation that's frustrating, so let's just use a really basic example, like somebody cuts you off in traffic. It's a very minor, very quick action, and it's very easy for our brains to be, oh, I'm really mad at that person, they cut me off, and get all frustrated and have that heated moment, whether it's just in your head or you're yelling in your car. It's a negative situation, it sucks, it's frustrating, but it happened. I think that response over that, your response to that thing that happened that you didn't have control over is what matters. So in that very simple example, when that happens to me, I don't always do this, but just to give a simple example, I'll have somebody cut me off. It's like, okay, it happened. I didn't have control over them, but it's not worth my time and energy to get frustrated about it, because it's not going to make my day any better to get mad or frustrated at that situation. So I know it's a really basic example, but that's just to kind of demonstrate what that mindset might look like. If something happens out of your control, how to more kind of productively respond to it. I think that this idea can be applied to a lot of other things, obviously, in life too. If somebody else does something frustrating, we don't have control over that thing that they did that's frustrating, but we have control over how we choose to respond to them. Whether it's in a kind way, providing them some grace. But I think that response doesn't always have to be a response where you're just letting things slide or letting somebody get away with something either. I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes it might actually be you responding or standing up for yourself, but having taken a moment to think about how you might productively respond to them, or effectively or kindly respond to them while still standing up for yourself, which I'll probably I will talk a little bit more kind of about that process later on too, but that's just kind of how I'm thinking about that control piece. Expectations. So life is unpredictable. huge cliche, but it's true. It's a fact. Like we really don't know where life is going. A lot of us probably have goals. We have things that we want to accomplish. But as we all know and have probably all experienced, a lot of times life doesn't go that way, or things don't work out the way that that we thought that they might. And so, as we think about those expectations, I think it's really important as you're thinking about life to give yourself that space to say, this is my goal, this is ultimately what I want to happen, but having a mindset that has prepared you to handle things when they don't go that way. So it's like, this is how I want them to go, but if they don't, this is how I'm going to handle that. This is how I'm going to approach it. This is the support system that I'm going to tap into to help me get through the challenge of the expectation not going the way that I wanted it to. And then when it comes to self-talk, there's a great researcher that I'm going to play a little clip from too, but that talks about that our self-talk, or kind of that inner dialogue, isn't really us. We aren't our thoughts. We aren't actually our feelings or emotions, and that they're just like these little like synapses that are firing in our brains. That if we take a moment to like acknowledge them, we can create a different reality. So the research I'm going to play a little bit later, we'll talk more about this. But I have a favorite quote. My favorite athlete, which most people have probably never heard of, her name is Gwen Jorgensen. She's a U.S. Olympic gold triathlete, and she just switched sports in the last year to her new goal is to win Olympic gold in marathon. And as a runner, I really relate to that. But one of her kind of like key mantras in her training is feelings don't dictate outcomes. So I can be feeling like my training's not going very well, or I'm really frustrated with how that workout went, or not feeling confident going into this race, but that thought doesn't have to dictate what the outcome is, only if I let it. So I think those are just kind of a few key points in talking about self-talk, which I think now then really ties into some of the science then that I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about. So this is kind of all this language about positivity, kind of some different lenses or perspectives to think about positivity through that are hopefully different than what you've heard, and acknowledging different aspects of life as still being a part of living a positive life. So now some science to back it up, and to actually prove that even if you feel like you're predisposed to think negatively, or maybe to be, to think about things realistically, that there's still a place for that in this idea of positivity. So there are two researchers, scientists, that I feel like have done a lot of work, or have a lot of work that really supports our brain's ability to change the way that we think. So one of them is Sean Achor. He's a social scientist. So he does work in positive psychology. And I have a little clip that I'm going to play from him. And then because I'm going to play these clips back to back, I'm going to give you a little bit more background on the second clip. Has anybody heard of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor before? She's a TED Talk. Oh, awesome. Great. Yeah. So she's got a really great TED Talk. But the little bit of background about Dr. Bolte Taylor, she is a neuroanatomist. And in 1996, she had a stroke. She was home in the morning, got up to do a workout before she went to work. And long story short, slowly started to realize that she was having a stroke while she was getting ready for work, which is obviously fascinating to her as a neuroanatomist. And rather than like calling for help, she just kind of let it happen so that she could experience a stroke, which I would love to talk with her more about that. But long story short, she really helped us understand just how differently the left and right hemispheres of our brain work. But then also in her recovery, our ability to really change and control the things that we let ourselves think. So when she had her stroke, the left hemisphere of her brain, which is kind of the thing that says, I am a being, the kind of the realistic portion of the brain is what she lost. So she had intact the right side of her brain, which is very much in the present moment. And she describes earlier in the clip that I'll play that she she couldn't feel her own boundaries. So she didn't recognize that she was in her body. She just felt like she was connected to everything in the space around her. But the thing that she really tapped into was energy, and the energy that people brought into the room and into the space. So it's fascinating. The clip that I'll play talks a little bit about her recovery and as she was starting to remember things. So the first clip is Sean Acor, like I said, is an interview that he did, and I'll play a little bit of that. And then the second one is Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor being interviewed by Oprah for a Super Soul conversation. If you've never listened to any of those, they're awesome. So let me get my clip up here.
Disorder.
You are speaking my language.
That's
Yes,
right.
more positive articles and information and input. All right, so studying happiness.
Yes.
What was one of the biggest misconceptions that you had to overcome or that you discovered in the research?
One of the biggest things I thought was that if we knew what was going on in somebody's external world, if we knew that they were at a place like Harvard, which is where I started this, or at an impoverished school in Africa, or if they were a banker on Wall Street, or if they were somebody that was underemployed, that we would know their levels of happiness pretty quickly. But it turns out in each one of those places, we found people that are incredibly optimistic and incredibly pessimistic or sad or depressed.
Mhm.
What we found out is that only 10% of our long-term levels of happiness are predicted based upon the external world. That means 90% of our long-term levels of happiness was a mystery to scientists until we started realizing it was about how we process that world. So if we can change the lens through which somebody views the world around them, not only can we change how reality affects them, but their ability then to affect that reality, to create a more positive reality at work, at home, in our relationships. And so I think part of what we need to do is be able to get beyond the idea that I cannot feel happy right now because of some external reason.
A negativity bias, not only in society, because most information is negative and salacious and trying to solicit our attention through sort of shock and sensationalism, but also our brain. I mean, our brain is not designed to make us happy, right? It's designed to keep us alive. And so it's looking for fear. It's looking for the negative. So we have these negative biases. How do we overcome that?
Well, I think one of the first things we need to do, you mentioned, is that if you open up your smartphone and read about the news, most of the information you receive is about murder and corruption and diseases and natural disasters. And very quickly, our brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. So the very first thing I would do is be able to change that, because that's a skewed ratio. And it's changing the way that we experience the world. It actually raises our symptoms. I was just speaking at a World Knowledge Forum, and which was so exciting. It was all these speakers from all over the globe coming to speak on how we can fix the world. And it was all about why economies fail and every nation that's collapsing and crime rising everywhere. And what I realized was this is not how you create success. I think one of the ways you do that is you shut out the noise. So part of what I've been doing is trying to decrease the noise in my life by 5%. Noise is information that doesn't actually move me forward, which is a lot of what that news is. It's not information I can use. And I've been trying to fill my brain with things that are more like you see in Success Magazine. They're ideas about how can I move forward? What are ways in which I could positively transform my life and affect other people as well? What we find is if you decrease noise, you increase the signal, which is the success signal that allows us to be more successful in the future. The other thing that allows us to do is the human brain is biased towards negative, right? If we don't do anything. So our brain is constantly looking for threats. But there are some very specific habits that we can do in our life that can flip that, so that as you construct reality, you're picking facts that move you forward. And that's what I've been trying to get people to do. Even something as simple as writing down 3 things you're grateful for 45 seconds a day. For 21 days in a row, we actually find you construct and architect a more positive reality. Your optimism rises even 6 months later, and it improves every single one of our business and educational outcomes.
So something as simple as that, right? Writing down 3 things you're grateful for. It's simple, it's easy to do, but how few people will actually take on the challenge and do it for the next 21 days. So I just want to stop.
In another interview that he does, he goes into more detail about the research behind the, trying to get the next slide here. the research behind the writing down 3 things you're thankful for, and they actually proved that people who coming into the study who had a predisposition for negative thinking changed that through all that. And the only thing that they did for 30 days was write down 3 things that they were thankful for. That's the only thing that they did. So I just think that's a fascinating tidbit that he didn't mention in this particular interview. So then this is Dr. Joe Pulte-Taylor's interview.
Support for this Super Soul conversation comes from ZipRecruiter. Looking for your next great hire but short on time? You just need the right tool.
Sorry, I'm trying to get this little thing to go away so I can get the time on here right.
Anymore. So I said no to the circuitry. I said, no, I just, you know, you have to remember that your brain's just a bunch of cells.
Right.
And I look at this.
Come on. I need to go back here. Anybody know how to get rid of this? Sorry. I know, but every time I move, it comes back. Oh, maybe. Good point. Thank you. Okay.
Life, I had none of her knowledge. I had none of her education. I had none of her memories.
Did you ever?
I'll just mention quickly, she talks about Gigi in this video, and that's her mother, just to give you some context.
Ever get to the point where you recalled those old memories?
After about 7 or 8 or 9 years, yeah, at that point, it was a good 8 or 9 years before I remembered items from my past that I know no one had taught me.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it took many, 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 many years.
So you basically had to relearn a self.
Exactly. I got reborn, essentially, if you will, and start from scratch. And here you go. What are you going to do with your second life? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what an opportunity. I mean, because think about it. I lost all my emotional baggage. On top of it, I lost all my pain. I lost any suffering I'd ever had. I lost all those memories. I lost it all. And I got to start fresh at the age of 37.
So as you then are developing this new self,
Yeah.
you have a choice
Right.
to either pick up the baggage
Right.
or not to pick up the baggage, or to
Exactly.
create new baggage.
Exactly.
And so you chose not to create new baggage.
Exactly.
How did you know not to do that?
Well, I didn't like the way it felt in my body, so I chose not to run that circuitry. It's circuitry. It's all about circuitry. For example, you can think something that makes you feel sadness, and sadness has a physiological feeling in your body, and your throat tightens, and things happen inside of you physiologically. I didn't like the way that felt, so I just decided that wasn't circuitry that I was going to run anymore. So I said no to the circuitry. I said, no, you have to remember that your brain's just a bunch of cells.
Right.
And I look at the cells as a bunch of little children. And some little children I want to play with, and there are other little children who I don't really like what they do, and I'm going to say,
So
no,
you
I
just
don't
say, I don't
want
want
to
to go there.
Exactly.
So
and anybody can do that.
So now you control your thoughts.
We all do. So right now you can stop and think about taxes. How did that feel in your body?
Not so good.
Exactly. But you had the ability to consciously think taxes and have that experience. You have the ability to focus your mind on what you want to focus it on.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's go to the Gigi.
So when you don't think about
That's
it
right.
anymore, it
That's
doesn't
right.
exist.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
let's go to the Gigi
The
piece.
Gigi thing. I mean, you think about the power between the mother-daughter relationship.
Right.
And if anybody's going to have any power in my life, it's going to be my mother.
Right.
Well, I didn't even know what a mother was, much less who my mother was. And I really liked this new entity, but she had none of her own power, her old power, which meant she couldn't coax me into doing anything the way that she used to be able to because the
she's a mother.
relationship,
Right.
because the game was different now. I changed the rules.
Oh my
I took
God,
away
this
her
is
power.
so freeing.
I know, that's the beauty of it.
Oh
When
my
you
God.
pay attention to what's going on in your own brain and you take responsibility for the circuitry you're running, you make the rules of a new game. And as soon as you change the way you interact with other people, the rules have changed and the game has changed. It demands change to happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's freedom.
How do we get some of this, Dr. Jill Pulte-Taylor, without having to have a stroke?
Yeah. Well, I'm
You
going to
write about finding your own inner
Yeah,
peace. How do we do it?
Pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're thinking, and you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are created by a tiny, tiny little group of cells about the size of a peanut sitting in your left hemisphere. And many of us let that little peanut rule our lives. And you have to recognize that it's just a group of cells that is designed to tell stories so that we feel safe in the external world. You are not your thoughts. So pay attention to what you're thinking and then decide if those are thoughts that are creating the kind of life that you want created. And if it's not, then change your thoughts. It's really that easy. And that doesn't mean you have to work real hard to do that. Just take responsibility for the thoughts that you're thinking and allow yourself to move yourself into the circuitry that brings you peace.
Wouldn't that be amazing if we all could tap into that
So-
without having to have a stroke to do it?
Exactly. And I believe 100% that anybody can. I think it's that attitude of gratitude. You know what it feels like inside of your body when you're feeling grateful? You're just feeling this celebration of life and oh my gosh, how fortunate it is for me to be on the planet, to have this form, and who knows what the future is going to bring and who knows what the past has brought. It doesn't matter. All I have is right now, and I'm celebrative, that gratitude. And that to me is the power of now.
You say it's also so important to pay attention to self-talk.
Absolutely.
Self-talk.
Oh,
yeah.
Pay attention to what you're saying to yourself and take some responsibility for that voice. I mean, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm not
Because
going.
that's all it is just talk.
It's just talk. And did you ever wonder when you're mad, really mad, and you're yelling at yourself? Did you ever wonder who's doing the yelling and who you're yelling at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the left hemisphere brain chatter yelling at that right hemisphere, which isn't always doing things absolutely to the detail that left hemisphere would like because it doesn't care about any of that stuff.
I hope you find her as entertaining as I do. I love her enthusiasm. She's just like so excited to talk about this. So in both of those clips, those videos, there are a few themes that I really saw as I was reading and listening to all these different speakers on all these tangential topics to positivity that continued to ring true, but I loved seeing them because they had science behind it, which I think if I'm going to try and convince anybody that you can change the way that you're thinking about life in general or just different things that are confronting you as challenges, we need that science to actually help us. I think I needed it even just to help me believe that, yeah, we can do this. So, you know, a lot of the themes that I think come out in both of these individuals, both Sean and Jill, were one, choice. That choice is really important. Both of them talked about that you need to make a choice. You need to decide, I want to think about X differently. They also talk about gratitude, which I could do a whole other presentation on gratitude, but I think, you know, obviously Dr. Bolte Taylor mentioned it, but Sean's research and showing that even just writing down 3 things you're grateful for a day can change the way that you're processing the world. But they also both talk about that circuitry piece and that our brain's ability, that neuroelasticity to run different wiring and different circuitry. So right now, even if you feel like you're predisposed to process the world or situations or things that happen in your life in a different, you know, in a negative way, in an unproductive way, if you put conscious thought into recognizing I'm doing that, you can make a change. You can change the way that you are interpreting that, or that you are responding, or that you are reacting to that. And I think both of them do a really good job of supporting the fact that it's possible to do that. And in our brains, well into our older age, one of the articles that's on the resources on the back of the handout that's at the top of the room there, there's one of the articles in there talks about that neuroelasticity of our brains. So quickly then, how do we, you know, kind of what's a process, a strategy, or an approach to, you know, kind of actually implementing this more, I feel like, more holistic way of living a positive life, because it's not as simple as just think positive. I think sometimes we need a process to help our brains get there, or to help our spirits, our bodies get to that place. And there are going to be simple little daily things that happen in our lives, like that person cutting you off in the car, that hopefully you're going to be able to respond to or react to more productively or positively instantaneously. But then there are also bigger things that happen in life that may require a little bit more time to figure out how we're gonna do that. So these are my 3 P's for positivity. So the first one is pause. And to me, pause really kind of came into play as I was reading and learning a lot more about mindfulness. And I think also gratitude comes into play here. That I think there's a lot of situations in life that in order to move forward positively, we need to just give ourselves the space to feel what we're feeling. So if we're feeling angry, upset, frustrated, hurt, downtrodden, whatever it is, you need to feel that, because if you don't give yourself the space to actually feel that, it's going to bubble back up later on, or you're going to shove that feeling off onto somebody else so that they feel it and you don't have to. It's going to be felt somewhere. So I think it's really important to give yourself that space to actually feel that feeling. And that time that you need may be a minute, it may be 6 months. Depending on what it is that you're facing. So then I think kind of a next step, and this is all fluid, so it's not as simple as step 1, step 2, step 3. You may flow back and forth between them, but to talk about them a little bit more separately. The next step I think that's really important then is to process it. Okay, I felt what I'm feeling. Now what do I do with that feeling? What do I want to happen because of what I've experienced, and what's kind of the actual reality of this situation. So there's a lot of things that I think are important to think about here, but I think the mindset is growth mindset. So kind of in this phase, we want to be thinking, you're going to be processing what happened through the right and the left hemispheres that Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor talked about. But I think it's important to recognize, especially as we look at things like control, what are the facts? What actually happened here? What do I actually have control over in this situation? Maybe really frustrated about that thing that this person said, but I can't force them to take that back. So what am I going to do kind of moving forward? I think also just why should I care about it? I feel like right now there's so much, there's a lot going on in the news, right? There's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot of things that we should care about, and that we do care about that are happening. But I think also, as Sean Acor was talking about in that video, there's also a lot of noise too. And I think sometimes we can have a heightened sense of frustration or nervousness because we're letting a lot of that noise in too. And sometimes I find it really important for me to take some time to decipher, okay, what do I really care about? Or what do I want to spend time thinking about based on what my values and my priorities are? Not that those things don't matter, these other things don't matter, but what do I actually want to spend time thinking about? So taking some time to kind of process that. But then also, who do I want to become as a result of this? And I think this is a really important thing when we're thinking about social justice issues that are causing us negativity or frustration in life. To me, these are those things that if I'm experiencing this or I'm seeing other people experience it, how do I want to move forward in a productive way? That doesn't mean that I'm just sitting where I'm at and letting it happen, or not saying anything, or I'm staying where I am. But who do I want to become as a result of this, or what action steps do I want to take? And that's why I talk about positivity being very action oriented, whether it's action, taking action on your thoughts, but also action actually in life too. So then kind of once you've taken that time to feel it, to process it, then we figure out, okay, how do I proceed? What am I going to do next? What's actually required of me in this situation? Who else do I need to, involve in this? And I think this really, to me, connects with the whole idea of resiliency. And the way that I like to talk about this with my students, because, I'll be working with a student who has been interviewing or applying for jobs for 6 months after graduation, and still nothing's worked out. And we're just continuing to focus on, what do they have control over? With the idea of, these are the things that we can be most productive, efficient, and effective at doing, rather than spending our time being frustrated or upset about that recruiter that's not getting back to me, or whatever that thing is that's frustrating them that they don't have control over. And as I kind of said, I think it's important in this kind of part, to think about who you might need support from too. That I don't think that we're going to approach this as, on an individual basis solely. That you may need to tap into your support system or your friends, family, whoever that might be, in order to move forward productively and positively in whatever the situation may be. So I think these 3 Ps, they maybe are a little bit more applicable in kind of bigger picture, bigger situations that you may be facing, but I think that they also are applicable in the little small day-to-day negative, frustrating things that happen that are just a part of life, and that you may move forward through, okay, I accept that I'm frustrated, this is why this doesn't matter, and moving on more quickly. So let's see, where are we at with time? Okay. I think we should move on. A few things that I would just encourage you to think about. We won't take the time to pair and share, but I would love to hear feedback on this too. So feel free to reach out to me on my email or through LinkedIn or my Instagram account, or if this is something you're interested in talking more about in your own life, this mindset change, I'd love to have coffee or lunch sometime too. So definitely feel free to reach out to me more. I love talking about this and helping other people think about how it would work for them. So what about this resonated for you, but what do you feel like I missed or was left unanswered? Because every time I present on this, I have people say, but what about this? And it changes my view and my perspective and the ways that I think about it every time too. So I want to hear about those. But how can you implement some of these things? What are some of those areas that you might struggle with related to control, expectations, self-talk, some of those sorts of things? So I know you have a couple more announcements. Do we have time if there are questions? Okay. I don't know if there's any questions or not.
So we do have time for a couple of questions, and I'll run around with the microphone. But just before that, can we thank Whitney for a great talk? Okay, if you have a question, raise your hand, and I will do some stair running.
You're going to get a workout in today. Man.
I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about the control aspect, the acceptance.
Yeah. So are you talking about when a situation that you don't have control over, something frustrating happens, accepting it and moving on? To me, and this, again, this is just my own personal perspective and kind of what I've gathered and from my own experience, I think that first step, that pause, is really important in accepting, because I think really in order to accept it, you need to feel whatever you're feeling about what happened. Because I think, when we think about acceptance, a lot of times it's kind of associated with needing a feeling of closure. And sometimes you're not going to get closure from the situation or from whoever happened, did this thing to you. So you need to decide that it's closed. And I feel like in order to do that, you have to give yourself the space to feel what it is you need to feel about it, and then be able to move on. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay, other questions in the room or online?
Great.
Okay. Seeing none, let's do one more thank you for Whitney.
Yeah.
And I just have a couple of announcements real quick before we get out of here. If you haven't signed in yet, please do that. That helps us in 3 ways. It helps us measure the impact that we're having with our Brown Bag series. But the other thing we'll do is send out a link to a very short survey, which will help you help us by suggesting topics for our other events in the series for the rest of the year. And that's the third benefit. If we have your email address, we will be able to let you know what and when those presentations are as we get them scheduled. So please sign in. And then the other quick thing I wanted to talk about is the P&A Senate. The P&A Senate, if you haven't looked into what we do, we work on a lot of different issues across the university that affect the P&A employees, from benefits to compensation to professional development. We've worked on issues of the day, such as the Child Care Center and the presidential search. So all things that affect the P&A employees on campus. You can get involved with the Senate in a number of ways. The most straightforward way is to become a senator. And Right now, there are a number of units across the university that do not have representation. They have vacancies. So if you go to the P&A Senate website and look up the senator list, you might see that there's a vacancy in your unit. Otherwise, we do elections, and you'll be hearing about those as the year goes on. Also, anybody can come to a Senate meeting. It's open to everybody, and our next Senate meeting is next week, October 12th, at time, anyone? We'll have to look that up. It's October 12th, 9:30
in 1-450 Moos.
in Moos Tower 1450. So,
Also a location in Brixton, Duluth.
and the satellite campuses also have viewing rooms for that. So that's another way. And then the third way is actually if there's a particular committee of the Senate that you think you would enjoy working on, it turns out you don't need to be a senator to work on a committee. So just contact your senator and we can work through that with you. So we would love to have as many P&A employees as possible involved in our governance. So we encourage that.
Or contact the co-chair or the chair of the committee directly if you'd like to as well.
So that's it. Thank you very much for coming and enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.
I'll be up here if anybody does have any questions. I've got a little time.